Hello, it's 24th of October 2021. It's been a week since I last did a talk about any one of the LPs that I particularly love. You will have noticed a minor change. I have had a shave. In the past 2 months since I had that particular health incident, I have lost 16 pounds, and I wanted to see what my face looked like without a beard on it, because I thought I might have been hiding my face under a beard so I couldn't see if I'd put on any weight. Having now had a shave and looking at my face now without a beard on it, it doesn't look like me anymore, if that makes any sense. Pretty strange kind of way of looking at it, to go, my face isn't me, as if my face belonged to somebody else. But there you are. So over future episodes, you will see day by day the slow and incipient growth of hair back onto my face, until I become some hairy kind of man-child once again. Today I am going to be talking about The Wedding Present's 4th or 6th LP, depending on your point of view, the fantastic Watusi, released on the 13th of September 1994. This is a very, very underrated, underloved wedding present album. I think very, very highly of it. And I'd like to explain kind of why this album, I think, really needs a critical reappraisal or a look at now that it's 27 years old. I don't even want to think about this LP being 27 years old, because I remember when it came out, I remember not being impressed with the singles that came off it, and I remember not buying it, which I later came to regret greatly, but so be it. So if we rewind the story back to when this album came out in September 1994, the world was a very, very different place. The Wedding Present as a band were really, really out of time when this was released. So they'd done the 12 singles on RCA, which had come into the hit parade period, and the hit parade obviously had spawned from it 12 top 40 singles that then failed to stay in the charts because there were only 15,000 copies of them. 2 albums, the Hit Parade 1 and 2, which have now been combined into one, and a couple of compilation LPs alongside that as well. And like a number of other artists in 1993, I think the band partially had not a crisis of confidence in themselves, but their record labels had a crisis of confidence in them. So in late 1992, early 1993, RCA Records, who both The Wedding Present and Pop Elite itself were signed to, had a major change of personnel. I'm not quite sure why, because RCA seemed to be doing pretty well at the time. But one of the people I think who worked there, Ben Corder, left and formed his own label, Infectious Records, who Pop Elite itself later signed to. And both Pop Elite itself and The Wedding Present found themselves in the position of not knowing anybody at the record label. This is something that happened to Morrissey actually in 1995 as well, is all the people that had been involved with bringing those 3 respective acts on board into the label had left. And so therefore, to use a terrible, terrible phrase, The Wedding Present, Pop Elite itself and Morrissey were legacy artists, and the people that were working with them at their record labels were not people that necessarily really, they weren't the people that were involved in bringing the bands on board. And so therefore, there were times when I think Morrissey said he'd ring his label and people would just not be at their desk, or they'd pretend not to be at their desk because they didn't want to talk to Morrissey. In the same respect, that's probably what happened here, is that both with RCA, is both The Wedding Present and Pop Elite itself were dropped by their labels, even though they were quite successful. Pop Elite itself hadn't recouped their deal, but effectively Richard Marx described it as RCA coming in and paying all the bills for them, and then them starting almost effectively with financially a clean slate. I'm not quite sure how much money, if any, The Wedding Present owed RCA. The Wedding Present have always been quite a financially astute band. They've been run quite carefully from a financial perspective, and they've never made any huge losses on anything, and if they do make a loss on something, they don't tend to do it a second time. So we also had a couple of upheavals in the band internally. Keith Gregory, who had been the band's bassist since before the band had formed, he was in the Lost Pandas with David Gedge in 1985, and had stayed in The Wedding Present all the way through, told David that he was going to be leaving The Wedding Present in 1993. So the band had a pretty much a double whammy there. They had to find a bass player, they had to find a new record label, and they had some new songs which they were going to go and release, and they didn't quite know how they were going to do it. So the next step that happened really was the band went touring, they wrote new material, They demoed new material. They played it on radio sessions, for example, and they kind of started again, kind of moving on a little bit from the hit parade and the Sea Monsters era. So most people's eyes were the Wedding Present were an old band. They were starting to fall out of favour because fashion moved very, very quickly in those days. If you were popular, you could have been popular for 6 weeks, then that would have been your career completely over because there's another band that's coming up right away. And so the first fruits of the album Watusi is actually an unreleased song. So this is a song that the studio version by the Wedding Present, the official studio version, has not been released. You can find it on this album as well as on the reissue, I think, of Watusi. Let me just quickly check. No, it isn't on there, although it is on, I think, the Hit Parade. It's a song called Softly Softly, and Softly Softly is the first post-Hit Parade song that the Wedding Present kind of recorded and eventually. Softly Softly is the song that turned into Yeah, 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 which is, in my opinion, one of the finest Wedding Present songs there is, and they've got lots of great wedding Present songs. But Softly Softly, apart from the chorus, is a completely different song with a completely different structure, a completely different set of lyrics. Over time, I think the band got better at weeding out songs that were effectively stillborn and weren't going to transpire into full songs. There's a number of unreleased Wedding Present songs from the early years. There's a lot less from the later period. They got better at working out what songs wouldn't survive and not investing time in them, but investing time in the songs that would survive the night of the long lives when it comes to the songs. Softly Softly you can find on this album, John Peel Sessions. I think you can find it on the Hit Parade reissue. You can also find it on the Peel Sessions box set that was released in 2007 that's on a shelf up there. Not that you can see it, I could be pointing to something imaginary, but I'm not. And the first single that was released from the album was the track Yeah, 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 Yeah. Or here, yep, a fantastic 12-inch, 7-inch, 2 CD singles I think it was released on as well. And it's just an absolute classic Wedding Present track, actually. If you don't know it, I think it's on YouTube. Well worth listening to, as good as anything else the band have ever done. The problem was the Wedding Present was seen by people as being yesterday's men. They were an old band that had started being popular 6 or 7 years ago. The new generation was coming up. 1994, when this was released, September the 13th, 1994. I think definitely maybe was definitely released that month. Park Life had already come out. His and Hers, Suede's Dogman Star, the Manic Street Preachers' Holy Bible. Britpop was very much in the ascendant. Noel Gallagher was wrapped around a Union Jack. We were dealing with a kind of a very insular, retrospective, nostalgic kind of linisation of 60s Britain at this time in history. And so therefore bands that had been popular 4 years ago, The Wonder Stuff, Pop Polluted Itself, Ned's Atomic Dustbin, The Wedding Present, The Fall, apart from The Cure, who had disappeared and were going to court. 1994 was almost like a holocaust of bands. Lots and lots of bands split up that year. Mega City 4, Kingmaker, both split up in 1995. The Wedding Present themselves took a break in 1997. 1994 also saw the end of The Wonder Stuff, and Suede's original lineup with Bernard Butler fragmented as well. So we were looking at a real kind of a changing of the guard in popular music. And The Wedding Present just simply didn't fit. This album, Watusi, which takes its name from a briefly popular solo dance craze in the early 60s, which is also, by the way, Watusi is the title of the sequel to the 1950s action-adventure daring do movie King Solomon's Mines, which was, I think, quite influential on Raiders of the Lost Ark. This album really pitched itself as being something which was almost deliberately out of time. Gedge's post-Wedding Present band, Cinerama, by the way, really kind of doubled down on this, and that's not in no way a criticism, but you can see the first springs of flowerings of Cinerama in Watusi. So Watusi has a completely different sound to the previous forms of the band. As Keith had left, the band had a new bass player, Darren Belk, and Darren brought with him a number of influences which the band hadn't previously had. So where Keith had very much liked the Velvet Underground and that kind of serrated guitar edge noise, and then obviously the band had worked with Steve Albini, they've got a very kind of heavy guitar-based not grunge, but pre-grunge sound. With Watusi, the band went a little bit a different way. So instead of doing core blimey Gavin, we're the Kinks, but we're not, oh yeah, kind of Britpop type stuff with horns and songs about living on Maidstone Street or wherever it was. Watusi was an album that looked back to a different period in history. It looked back to the childhood of both David Gedge and a number of the other members of the group, which was the 60s. It took its name from the dance craze Watusi, which I've mentioned about 2 minutes previously. The imagery that we've got on the album, and as you can see from here, it's got a heavily treated photograph of an old radio. It's got a kind of stylized record player, a stylized image there of a camera and of a hairdryer. Also on the singles, we've got a bit of specific imagery, quite treated specialist pictures of toys from the 60s and also toy model steel aeroplanes, probably the type that had lead line paint that if you licked enough of it you probably died. And this was the perfect cover for the album. It's brighter, it's bolder, it's got an unusual combination of colours, because you wouldn't necessarily expect a red background with a green photograph of an old-fashioned radio there. Looks like bush, actually, probably. The kind of portable radio that you would have in the 60s. You'd put batteries in and you'd sit in the park listening to it in the days when it was quite hot and quite warm and all the girls wore bikinis. And there is, in fact, a song, I think, about bikinis on one of the B-sides of one of the singles. So Watusi tapped into that kind of vaguely half-remembered version of the 60s, the early 60s, before the hippies happened. So surf rock, grunge culture, garage culture, kind of like big, wider sets of instrumentation. The video, by the way, for the first single from the album, Yeah, is actually a 4-minute version of effectively a short film that portrays the band as spies in a 60s spy caper called the Yeah affair. That's broken up into 4 chapters during the course of the video, with subtitles like Part 4, So Long Baby. If you've watched things like The Men from U.N.C.L.E., Thunderbirds, Our Man Flynn, the Ipcress File, the James Bond movies, yeah, the video looks just like it's a lost kind of spy caper from the 60s, probably with Robert Vaughan and Michael Caine in the background, and it's all set up as a fantastic little homage to that. I think it was a bit ahead of its time, because it picked the wrong part of the 60s. Everyone else was looking at the mid to late 60s and only the bands that were coming from Britain, whereas this was had its one foot firmly rooted in Americana, surf rock, and things like that. And the producer for Watusi was a chap called Steve Fisk. Steve Fisk produced Nirvana, he produced Soundgarden, The Screaming Trees, but grunge was dead. Grunge died the day that Kurt Cobain ate a shotgun in April 1994. And so therefore, the fact that The Wedding Present had made a pre-grunge album with Steve Albini called Sea Monsters, that, by the way, was amazing, but came out 6 months too soon, because it was, again, ahead of the tide. The band then made an album that, again, was completely in the wrong period of history. Maybe if this album had come out a year later, people would have been kinder to it. But there you are. So The Wedding Present signed to RCA Records. The first single, Yeah, which was released on a 12-inch, and I think there were 2 CDs of it. So here's the first one, there's the second. The first one is in a card sleeve, and it's backed with alternate versions of Gazebo, So Long Baby, and Spangle, which I think were recorded for the BBC for a John Peel session. And these are different versions of the songs. And on the second CD, which is here, I've got multiple CDs of Yeah, by the way. It kind of opens up, and it's backed with Le Bikini, Flame On. I think it's a cover version of Tom Jones's Him or Me. What's it going to be? I think it's Tom Jones anyway. I must admit, I don't know, to be sure. But it gave you 7 new wedding present songs, only one of which was on the album. The versions of, I think, Spangle and Gazebo and So Long Baby. Spangle and Gazebo, I think, were being played in quite a traditional rock format, as opposed to the versions which are actually on the album Watusi, which I've not even talked about in any great detail. So here we go, Watusi. This album was released by Island Records. It's not been reissued, or it's more correctly, it's not been repressed on vinyl. It's the only Wedding Present album from the band's 1986 to 1996 period that hasn't been repressed on vinyl since its original release. This is quite a rare album to get now. I think you're looking at least around 50 quid to get a copy of Watusi. It would be a heck of a lot more, but not that many people like the Wedding Present, which is both a blessing and a curse. And Island Records, much like a certain other band, I think there's a feeling that sometimes the band's relationship with the labels may have soured, and so the label, intentionally or not, either just doesn't give a shit or deliberately chooses to not allow repressing some reissues on other labels. Although Watusi did get a re-release in 2014 as part of the band's reissue series. We'll get to that at the end of the video. Watusi, I think, is a really good album that suffers in two areas. The first one is it's a great album by The Wedding Present, but it's not a great album for 1994. The world had changed and The Wedding Present had changed, and they'd changed in different directions. The second one is, I think, the sequencing that we've got on the album Watusi could be better. I know David Gedge spent a lot of time thinking about the sequencing for the albums and trying lots and lots of different running orders and sequencing and mixing for the albums. It's the only album by The Wedding Present that I've substantially changed the running order of. Is Watusi, because effectively it's two different types of The Wedding Present in one. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. So it opens with So Long Baby, which is quite an old-fashioned, straight-in garage rock number. You wouldn't be surprised actually if So Long Baby had been a great Lost Velvet Underground track from the 60s that might appear on a box set of Loaded. It's a brilliant song, but it doesn't sound like a great song to open an album with. Well, I've talked in, I think, episode 17 about album sequencing. I think an album sequence has to be an ebb and a flow, and it has to reach up and pull up and have climaxes and go back down again and reach up and then have a conclusion. So it has to have a narrative and a structure and a form that's vaguely similar to a 45-minute Sonic movie. So Long Baby effectively is like the opening shot of a film, but it's the opening shot of The Fast and the Furious, which opens on a car at high speed just racing straight at you. There's no subtlety about it, there's no build up to it, it just goes boom and opens straight with lyrics and roaring guitars. I think So Long Baby would be better at the start of side 2. In fact, I think the best track to open this album with is the song that ends the album, which is Hot Pants. Hot Pants is a 2-minute surf rock instrumental that sounds like it would have appeared in the credit sequence to a 60s spy TV show about some kind of crime-fighting secret CIA agent that was also a shit-hot surfer. It's a brilliant little song. It shouldn't be the end song on the album. It should be the start of the album, and it should also, by the way, Hot Pants should be first, so it can clearly kind of point out to you right from the off that this is The Wedding Present, but not as you know them, Jim. So a slightly different version of the band. Second song on the album is Click Click. I think Click Click is brilliant. David Gedge also thinks it's his favourite song on the album. It's a great, repetitive, very minimal song. It reminds me very much of bands like My Bloody Valentine in some respect, because it's actually got quite a static, slowly changing sound, and it's, as a song, it kind of reminds me of like listening to paint dry, but it's the most beautiful paint in the world. And then it ends on this fantastic drawn-out vocal melody duet, which kind of just endlessly repeats itself through various variations of backing vocals. The third song is Yeah, 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 Yeah. I'll just call it Yeah times 5 from now on, by the way. Yeah times 5, first single from the album, which I've mentioned before. Brilliant video, brilliant song, absolute banger live. Hardly anybody knows it. Absolute tragedy, because it's a bloody brilliant song. It really is. And then we've got number 4, which is Let Him Have It. I would put Let Him Have It towards the end of the second side. Let Him Have It is a curious lyric, which isn't necessarily fully clear about what it's about. Now, I have a theory about Let Him Have It, that it's actually inspired by the Christopher Eccleston film from 1991 of the same name, which takes its title from the last words that were spoken by, I think, one of the last people to be hung in the UK, which was Derek Bentley. And there was a famous court case where somebody that Derek Bentley was with was holding a knife in the presence of a policeman, and Derek said, let him have it, and the jury interpreted that to mean stab him to death. And so the Home Secretary, who was able to intervene in that, didn't, and Derek Bentley was, I think, hung less than less than a month after he was convicted, so the process hasn't had time necessarily to go through for appeal. It's a disturbing film, and the lyrics are very, very they're very double-edged. So they could be read about the film, they could be read about a guy saying to his girlfriend or his ex-girlfriend, it's over and you should let him have it, so give it to him. I don't want it, I don't need it, I don't really care enough about it. The light is getting dim. You don't want me, you don't need me, you don't really care enough about it. Give it to him. That's the lyric to Let Him Have It. It's a dark, dirty song, and it's a very minimal lyric, which I think is really great. Nobody writes love songs as good as David Gedge, not even me or John Grant, but it's a fantastic lyric, and one that really kind of captures a certain period. But it's a very minimal, almost crawl arrangement in this particular song. Track 5 is, let me just quickly check, Gazebo. Gazebo is available in 2 forms, and Spangle and Gazebo are songs that are, interestingly enough, the versions of the songs that are on the album were not recorded for the album. They were recorded as potential B-sides. But when the band were putting together the final track listing of Watusi, the suggestion was that they could perhaps use the alternate versions and it would expand the band's sound a little bit. So the alternate versions of Gazebo and Spangle are, I think, available. They're available on this, which is called Versions, which is a 10-inch promo of B-sides released in America, which has the versions of Gazebo and Spangle on it. And I think it's also on the single to It's a Gas, which is... the CD single of It's a Gas is here, and the CD single of It's a Gas does feature not those tracks, actually, so maybe the radio session versions are used. So there you are. So with Watusi, we're coming to the end of side 1, ends on Shake It. Shake It is the first non-Gedge lead vocal in the entire of the Wedding Present's career. Now, for someone that thinks that if it doesn't matter if it's me and your granny on bongos, it's the Wedding Present. The Wedding Present has always been, in terms of a creative position, open to contributions from other members. So it's not just been David and some sleeper blokes, although one of the sleeper blokes, John Stewart, is currently in the Wedding Present, and he is a fantastic choice for the band. Shake It has vocals by Darren Belk on it. And when I saw the Wedding Present in 2014, their then guitar player, I think Samuel Pierce, I think was his name, sang the track Shake It when they played it live. So it's a nice change, and it's a rarity to see in the set list. What we then have, we go over to side 2, and side 2 opens with Spangle. Spangles are kind of like this weird, chintzy, cheap kind of jewelry type stuff, but also if you've got sparkly clothes, 60s were chock full of this stuff, lots of spangled things going on. And it's got this really interesting kind of sound, because Spangle on the album is a recording by Steve Fisk at the same time as the rest of the album, but it's not in a traditional Wedding Present format. It was recorded using a keyboard called an Optigon 1. An Optigon 1 takes its sound from effectively notes that are played off vinyl. So the crackle that you get on Spangle is actually the crackle on the original 7-inch. There's on the old-fashioned 60s keyboard the Optigon takes its sound from. So it's unique, and every single Optigon has a slightly different sound, because the records that it takes the sound from are physical objects that have aged differently and been played differently over a period of time. Spangle is also used, by the way, as one of the band's intro and outro tapes on many, many live shows. So even if you don't know it, you've probably heard it if you've seen the Wedding Present live. Track 2 on the side 2 is It's a Gas. It's a Gas is a brilliant song. Second single from the album, which I will get to in a moment. The single was re-recorded by Ian Brody, although the version that's on the album is by Steve Fisk. And I think the version on the album is, as an arrangement, it's slightly rubbery, it's slightly rigid, slightly boxy. It's perhaps not quite it's not got as much slink and groove and slide to it. It's more more kind of mechanical, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. I'm sorry, I'm going very much into Sude's corner here on if Melody Maker was still published, no doubt they would give me a kicking for me talking about vast cathedrals of sonic beauty or something. It's a gas, the single version is better, but the song itself, absolutely brilliant. And it's got a fantastic lyric, once again, about infidelity and temptation in relationships, because I don't think there's anything else that Gedge really talks about. Track 3, side 2, Swimming Pools and Movie Stars. This is a really important song in the band's body of work, Swimming Pools, Movie Stars, because Swimming Pools and Movie Stars is exactly what Gedge's next band, Cinerama, who formed in 1997, are all about. So this album is really the template from which Cinerama grew. You know, there's a fascination with spy movies, deception, prestige, daring-do, weird and unusual sounds. The 60s, piccolos, vast instrumentation. It's a kind of a, you know, like probably the idea. If Cinerama was a film, it would have been an Italian spy film that had been badly dubbed and shown on ITV at 2 o'clock in the morning in the 1980s, but made in 1958 and probably starring somebody like Alain Delon. Although Alain Delon was French and didn't come to prominence before that. When I was a kid, I remember watching, there was a lot of Alain Delon films that were on late at night on ITV because they were cheap. So I would watch all of those movies. That's the world I grew up experiencing. Gage, being slightly older than me, probably was watching the same movies, but might have had a very different night before, because when I was watching them, they may have been, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something. He may have been watching them when he'd come back from the pub or a night out or going to see the Fall at Leeds Poly. I'd be watching them because I'd done nothing else all day and I wasn't really interested in a question of sport. So Swimming Pools and Movie Stars is the kind of song that lends itself to Cinerama. One of the first songs which was brought back by Cinerama when they started dipping a little bit deeper into the Wedding Presents body of work by playing a song that's very clearly about that hotel swimming pool at the top or on the roof of the hotel in LA. I'm going to guess it's called the Hyatt, with movie stars, which was seen in Spinal Tap and a number of other movies as well. And it's an important song in the Wedding Presents body of work, and one that changed their direction actually. Also, they performed Swimming Pools and Movie Stars live on the Esther Ransom show. That's how rock and roll the bands are. So we've got 3 songs on the album to go. One is Big Rat. Big Rat, not my favourite. Again, a short kind of 2-minute instrumental kind of track that comes and goes, and really I'd put Big Rat at the end of the album. And then what I regard to be pretty much the climax of the LP, song 11, is Catwoman. Catwoman is amazingly good. It's a 7-minute epic of Sturm und Drang and noise, raw, and it's got this fantastic lyric about the pussycat in you brings out the man in me. My partner listening to that and went, I thought the Wedding Present were rubbish. I was like, oh no. But they don't do songs like Catwoman very often, which is such a shame. God, I wish this album would get repressed on vinyl. This copy was not cheap, and it's certainly nowhere near as expensive as most copies are these days when they're available for sale. It's a brilliant album, and I just wish more people knew Watusi as an album. It's always been kind of, I think even in the reissue, it's described as the neglected teddy bear at the back of the Wedding Presents cupboard, which I think is probably the right way of describing this particular LP. It was an album out of time, and it just didn't belong in the world in which it was born into, which is a real shame. So, second single from the album, It's a Gas. Here's the CD single, which is backed with a cover version of, I think, Mark Riley and the Creepers' Jumper Clown, which is, by the way, a song about Mark E. Smith, an acoustic version of It's a Gas, and a new track called Bubbles. There's also a 7-inch, which is also backed with Bubbles. Here's the 7-inch of it, and my version of the 7-inch comes in a paper sleeve inside there for added protection, ribbed for my pleasure, to use a terrible phrase. But again, if you look at the iconography that we've got, and It's a Gas, the iconography we've got on there is I think a 12-inch, a purple vinyl 12-inch of It's a Gas. I don't have that yet. That's the one Wedding Present record I definitely know I don't own, by the way. is it's got that imagery there of a kind of like a childhood toy from the 60s, a steel plane that's been heavily heat treated, reminiscent, by the way, very much of the cover of New Order's Technique album. And New Order's Technique album, by the way, is a thermal photograph of a garden ornament that's then been treated with various colours. And if you look at the cover that we've got for It's a Gas, it's the same kind of approach. These could be effectively by the same band at the same time, although obviously New Order in 1989 and Wedding Present in 1994 were very, very different bands. So we've got to that. We had a number of releases which came out afterwards, by the way. So after the release of Watusi, here's the original Island Records CD. If you're able to get it, I mean, by the way, you can tell the album didn't sell very much because it's got a deletion cut through the barcode there. But again, the price of a record and how much you love the record are two very, very, very different things. There were two compilation albums that were released. So I think in 1997 there was the Evening Sessions 1986 to 1994 album was released. This contained some sessions from 1994, including versions of Click Click, It's a Gas, Hot Pants, and Catwoman. This one came out on Cooking Vinyl again in 1998. Once the band had split, as a way of perhaps paying back some of the advance, which featured recordings of Softly Softly, also known as Yeah 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 Yeah, Spangle, So Long Baby, Gazebo, Him or Me, What's It Gonna Be? And in America, the B-sides were all wrapped up in this promotional 10-inch called Versions, a collection of B-sides and outtakes from the Watusi sessions. This is an 8-tracker. My version is still sealed because I've never felt the need to open it because almost all of the tracks are on CD. Side 1 has the original LP version of Spangle, which is a more electric band performance as opposed to the one played on the Octagon. Flame On, Jumper Clown, and Le Bikini, by the way. Track 3, Jumper Clown, written by Mark Riley after he had left The Fall, apparently because he used to call Marky Smith a jumper clown. And I think when Mark left the group, for example, or Mark Riley left The Fall, Marky Smith wouldn't buy The Enemy or The Melody Maker. He would steal Mark Riley's copy of it and find out what they were saying about him. And then apparently he sacked Mark Riley because Mark Riley danced on the dance floor in an Australian nightclub whilst on tour, and Marky Smith was offended by the song he was dancing to and his dancing style. So Dare to Dance on an Aussie Floor is part of the lyrics that are inside Jumper Clown, and the band played it more as an affectionate tribute to The Fall and also to John Peel, which is why I think it's on the radio session on one of the tracks here. If it's not on the radio session here, it's definitely been played by the band at a Peel session or a Mark Riley session. On the second side of versions is the original band version of Gazebo, which was intended for the LP but not used. Bubbles, Him or Me, What's It Gonna Be, and a version of So Long Baby. And So Long Baby, by the way, is, let me just quickly read that, it is the original version, so it's an alternate version of the track. Watusi has somewhat been written out of the band's history. Lots of people forget about its existence because most people focus, we've only got so much space in our brains, most people focus on the band's earlier stuff, so George Best, Tommy, Bizarro, Sea Monsters, The Hit Parade. Oh, they did an album called Watusi. Oh, I didn't buy it, it's probably rubbish. And then there was Minnie, and then there was Saturnalia in 1996. So Watusi was really the beginning of the band's commercial end, if that makes sense. So that the fame and the ascendant which the band had taken up to that point maybe could be seen as an aberration, and actually the size that they were from here on in, playing to 300-400 people a night, some nights sometimes 1,500. It's a size that they've comfortably operated at ever since, and have managed to make it work for them. But it's been written out of, I think, history. A lot of people don't know the Watusi album, or when the band plays songs from it, they don't really know those songs at all, which is a real shame. and the album has only been reissued once, unlike some of the other albums. So I think George Best, Bizarro, Sea Monsters, and the Hit Parade all got 4x 10-inch box releases. They got expanded CD releases on, I think maybe Demon Records. But I think Watusi has really only been reissued in 2014 when it got the 3 CD and DVD version. So the first CD of Watusi from 2014 has the 12 album tracks, plus an extra 11 songs, including the alternate version of Yeah times 5, Spangle, Gazebo, So Long Baby, and the single re-recording of It's a Gas, alongside the B-sides which I already mentioned. CD 2 on here features the John Peel session from the 22nd of March, featuring the electric version of Gazebo and Spangle, So Long Baby, and Him or Me, the evening session version of Click Click, It's a Gas, Hot Pants, and Catwoman, which appear on the CD, I think, here. No, this is the John Peel version, by the way, and the John Peel versions are also on one of the CDs of Yeah, so that's been released 3 or 4 times. And then finally, live at the Phoenix Festival, 14th of July 1995, and then a Hit the North session for the BBC Radio 5 in 1993, which features versions of Let Him Have It, Catwoman, Swimming Pools and Movie Stars, Bubbles, and Flame On. As I've said, the band don't really record demos, they record radio sessions of versions of the songs that they're happy with. So the nearest thing you get to wedding present demos, in most cases, apart from rehearsal tapes, which don't really circulate, are the radio session versions. In case you're wondering, well, why aren't there demos? There's only demos, I think, on the Bizarro CD, which were paid for by RCA before the band signed to RCA. So live at the Phoenix Festival, 14th of July 1995, which is also on the 6-disc John Peel Sessions box set, which was deleted the week it came out, thanks to Sanctuary Records going under. CD 3 is live tape number 14 from Rouen in France, which I have never been to. In fact, I don't even know if I've been anywhere near it, because I've only been to about 3 cities in France. Sorry, guys. I'm sure your country is lovely, but has been going anywhere for most of the past 18 months. The band used to release live tapes, which you could mail order and get for £5 from the band directly. Live tape 13, recorded in Strasbourg, has not been issued on CD yet because Live 1994 hasn't been released yet. The series has only gone up to Live 1993. When it gets to Live 1994, it almost definitely will have Strasbourg on, because Strasbourg is the missing live tape so far. Live tape number 15 is Rouen on the 17th of March 1995, a very Watusi heavy set. There, by the way, with So Long Baby, It's a Gas, Click Click, Spangle, Yeah, an early version of Jet Girl, which comes from her upcoming mini album Swimming Pools and Movie Stars, Gazebo, and Catwoman. The DVD features promotional videos of the Yeah, which is that Yeah affair, which is a fantastic promo video, but completely out of time. An appearance on the Esther Ranson TV show Swimming Pools and Movie Stars, an interview with David Gedge, and an acoustic version of Gazebo filmed in Hove, East Sussex. This version, if you're only going to get one version of Watusi, get this version. This really is the definitive kind of special edition. I wish more bands did. Cheap, affordable. This was like £30-40 when it came out, which was 4 discs, including a live show, a DVD, in fact 2 live shows, a bunch of radio sessions, and all the B-sides. It was a very, very well packaged set, but it didn't sell enough, and the copies that didn't sell were destroyed for tax purposes, which is an absolute tragedy. That brings up to the end of Wedding Presents album number 6, 1994's great lost classic, Watusi. Not my favourite Wedding Present album, but it's bloody brilliant. I love it, and I've really grown to love it over the past 10-15 years or so as I've listened to it more. Really enjoy this album, a hidden gem in their catalogue. I strongly recommend, if you don't know it, buy it if you can find it. If you can't find it, by the way, you won't be able to find it on vinyl for cheap because it's not been repressed in the past 27 years. But if you can find a CD, it's well worth investigating, and you can get almost all the tracks off it elsewhere. Watusi is a fantastic wedding present album. It is better than some other ones that are coming up in the band's story. It's also the first wedding present album that indicates what will happen next and where David Gedge will go creatively. It is the very first kind of seedlings of the band Cinerama, who I love and not enough people do love, and I will talk about when I get to that point. In the meantime, I'm going to wrap up here. My next episode, because I didn't do one for a week because I have been at 2 shows, one in London, one in Canterbury, and I've been working pretty hard, and my brain's been tired. I do these when I feel like it, when my brain tells me I can do them, and when I am obsessional compulsive enough about it to be able to go and feel confident to talk to my mobile phone for about 40 to 45 minutes about a band. Also, if I can get my hair to grow quicker so that I look back like the bearded handsome chap that you know and love, I will work on that too. But sadly, a beard doesn't grow like Play-Doh. You can't just turn the handle and it goes like that. You'll just have to see it happen one day at a time. My next episode is almost definitely going to be a band I haven't talked about yet, and you will be quite surprised to hear I may very well be talking about Metallica's Kill 'Em All debut album from 1983. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. Be lovely in the comments. I will put links to various live shows, promo videos, and so on and so forth below the text down there. And I will see you all soon. Stay beautiful. Bye.